Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also praying, paying our obeisance to Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of the Bhagavatam. And we're also praying to Srimati Radharani via the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who said if we cannot understand something about Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Bhagavatam, then our study has been for waste. So in this way, we are praying to Srimati Radharani. Yadi seva vanchitasya ma yasya kripaya vayam labema sarvam prapnuma prayojanam damni Shri Bhagavat Pade Krishna sambandhi sarvam cha yadi na janimahe tutam ashtadashasu sahasreshu shlokanam Bhagavat oktishu radharanimna vindamhatada Nishphalam Bhagavat Adhyayanam Radhi Kaya Kripam Vina Vyartasyat Sarva Parishrama. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Srimati Radharani, all our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing our reading today from Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 29. Talks between Nārada and King Prācīnabarhi. Text 72. Garbhe balye pi aposhkalyad ekadasa vidham tada lingam na drishyate yuna kuvam chandramasoyata. When one is a youth, all the 10 senses and the mind are completely visible. However, in the mother's womb or in the boyhood state, the sense organs and the mind remain covered, just as the full moon is covered by the darkness of the dark moon night. Purport. When a living entity is within the womb, his gross body and 10 senses and the mind are not fully developed. At such a time, the objects of senses do not disturb him. In a dream, a young man may experience the presence of a young woman because at that time the senses are active. Because of undeveloped senses, a child or boy will not see a young woman in his dreams. The senses are active in youth, even when one dreams, and although there may be no young woman present, the senses may act and there may be a seminal discharge or a nocturnal emission. The activities of a subtle and gross body depend on how developed conditions are. The example of the moon is very appropriate. On a dark moon night, the full shining moon is still present, but it appears not to be present due to conditions. Similarly, the senses of the living entity are there, but they only become active when the gross body and the subtle body are developed. Unless the senses of the gross body are developed, they will not act on the subtle body. Similarly, because of the absence of desires in the subtle body, there may be no development in the gross body. Text 73. Artehya vidyamhanepi samshritirna nivartate, dhyayato vishayan asya, svapne nartagamoyata. When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. Purport. It is sometimes said that because a child is innocent, he is completely pure. Actually, this is not the fact. The effects of fruitive activities reserved in the subtle body appear in three concurrent stages. One is called bija, the root. Another is called kutastha, the desire. And another is called phalonmukha, about to fructify. The manifest stage is called prarabdha, already in action. In a conscious or unconscious state, the actions of the subtle or gross bodies may not be manifest, but such states cannot be called the liberated state. A child may be innocent, but this does not mean that he is a liberated soul. Everything is held in reservation, and everything will become manifest in due course of time. Even in the absence of certain manifestations in the subtle body, the objects of sense enjoyment may act. The example has been given of nocturnal emission, in which the physical senses act even when the physical objects are not manifest. The three modes of material nature may not be manifest in the subtle body, but contamination of the three modes remains conserved, and in due course of time it becomes manifest. Even if the reactions of the subtle and gross bodies are not manifest, one does not become free from the material conditions. Therefore, it is wrong to say that a child is as good as a liberated soul. Text 74. Evam pancha vidham lingam trivrit sodasha vishrutam isha chaitanya yukto jivha ityabhidhiyate. The five sense objects, the five sense organs, the five knowledge-acquiring senses, and the mind are the 16 material expansions. These combine with the living entity and are influenced by the three modes of material nature. Thus, the existence of the conditioned soul is understood. Purport. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Mamayavam so jibha loke jibha bhuta sanatana mana shastan indriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Here, it is also explained that the living entity comes in contact with the 16 material elements and is influenced by the 3 modes of material nature. The living entity and this combination of elements combine to form what is called Jiva Bhuta, the conditioned soul that struggles hard within the material nature. The total material existence is first agitated by the 3 modes of material nature, and these become the living conditions of the living entity. Thus, the subtle and gross bodies develop, and the ingredients are earth, water, fire, air, sky, and so on. According to Srimad, when consciousness, the living force in the heart, is agitated by the 3 modes of material nature, then the subtle body of the living entity, consisting of mind, the sense objects, the 5 senses that acquire knowledge, and the 5 senses for acting in the material condition, becomes possible. Text 75. Anena purusho dehan upadate vimunchati arsam shokam bhayam dukam shukam chanena vindati. By virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. Purport. According to this explanation, one can already understand that originally the living entity was as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his pure spiritual existence. However, when the mind becomes polluted by desires for sense gratification, in the material world, the living entity drops into the material conditions, as explained in this verse. Thus he begins his material existence, which means that he transmigrates from one body to another and becomes more and more entangled in material existence. The process of Krishna consciousness, by which one always thinks of Krishna, is the transcendental process by which one can revert to his original spiritual existence. Devotional service means always thinking of Krishna. Man manha bhava mad bhakto, mad yaji mam namaskuru, mam evayasya, mam evayasyasi satyam te, prati jane priyo sime. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Bhagavad Gita 18.65. One should always engage in the Lord's devotional service. As recommended in the Archan Marg, one should worship the deity in the temple and constantly offer obeisances to the spiritual master and the deity. These processes are recommended to one who actually wants to become free from material entanglement. Modern psychologists can study the actions of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing, but they are unable to go deeper into the matter. This is due to their lack of knowledge and to their not being associated with a liberated acharya. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.2, Evam param praptam imam rajarshayo vidhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Guided by so-called psychologists and philosophers, people in the modern age do not know of the activities of the subtle body and thus cannot understand what is meant by transmigration of the soul. In these matters, we have to take the authorized statements of Bhagavad Gita 2.13. Dehinosmin yata dehe kumaram yovanam jara tata deham tara praptir dhiras tatra namuyate. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. Unless all human society understands this important verse in Bhagavad Gita, civilization will advance in ignorance and not in knowledge. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 76 on Wednesday. Dandava pranamo Madevi. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev Ki Jai. Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvitam Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Gaur Leela Krishna Lila Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bol. Jai. Jai Srimati Uma Devi Das ki jai.
Sripad Krishna Kesava Prabhu ki jai.
Hari Bol.
Good afternoon.